You probably have some days where you feel super inconsistent, and then you have other days where you feel super consistent, hitting every flick, all that stuff. We all do. As an aim coach, the number one thing people tell me they struggle with is flicking consistently. If you want consistent flicks, listen up, this is all you need. First, we gotta go over the parts of the flicks. Most people in most videos think of flicks as only having two parts, the initial flick and the micro adjustment. The initial flick being the big motion that cuts the majority of the distance between your crosshair and the target, and the micro adjustment being the little small thing that corrects any inaccuracies that you're off the target by. Don't get me wrong, initial flicks and micros are both rail motions. The information is good. If someone says a flick is two parts, flick and micro in a video, that's a good video with good information. But I think people get a lot more benefit from thinking of flicks as a 5-part motion. First, you got your reaction. In-game, a person appears on your screen, you have to become aware of where they are, and then start to plan your flick. If you practiced aim before, your brain will just plan it out unconsciously. You won't have to think, you won't even know the person's on your screen, and your unconscious mind has already planned the flick to their head. Next, you obviously got your standard initial flick. However, instead of thinking of it as initial flick then micro, I want you to think of it as initial flick, transition into micro, and then micro. The transition step is probably the most important part of a flick, and the part where you see the greatest separation by skill levels. Not only because better players can do it better, like initial flicks and micros, but also because what you're supposed to do and what's optimal is completely different when you're good compared to when you're bad. And yet, a lot of people never even talk about this or brush over it. A bad player's transition will usually involve a complete stop, a reaction to where the target is, a plan of the micro adjustment, an execution of the micro adjustment, and all of that. Not because those are bad things, but just when someone's at a lower skill level, this is what the best thing you can do is. It sounds like it's a lot of steps, but even for someone who's really new to aiming, the brain can do this in a small fraction of a second. Now let's say you're a lot better, maybe you are a good player. Your transition will involve a well-timed slowdown, no reaction because you can already feel how far off your mouse is and just micro into it, and you will carry the momentum from your flick into the micro rather than stopping instantaneously or for a period of time. This is the ideal technique, but if you're not good, even if you try to do it, you won't figure it out and you'll become way less accurate, which is why you gotta practice to be able to even try to apply this technique. The micro should be a straight adjustment. There should only be one, and its accuracy and speed are up for debate. If you're playing a small scenario where you're supposed to be always accurate and one or two misses will kill a whole run, be slow and consistent with the micros. In a game like attack FPS, like Valorant, where you need to kill or die first, then you need to make your micros faster or you won't kill, you'll die. The final step I call the click. Some people will call it the confirm you're on target, target confirmation, whatever. But the issue is, what if you don't confirm? There's two things you can do. You can either confirm you're on target, make sure you're on target, and then click. Or you could do what Europe does. He's one of the 3 best guys in 116 target small. He got his scores so high by not confirming when he's on target, instead just clicking. For super high accuracy scenarios, this isn't really viable for anyone watching this. It's only really viable for like 10 or 20 people worldwide. But for actual games, this is the default approach. Because you don't need to be accurate, you just want to hit the person before they hit you. So depending on what you want to do, how accurate you want to be, how fast you need to be, just click when you finish your micro adjustment or confirm and then click. As an aim coach who works with a lot of attack FPS players, one of my main jobs is to guide people from the low skill section of this to the high skill section of this for their flicking techniques. First, I gotta rein in the flicks and micros in new players. If the person's insanely shaky, making multiple micros, whatever, I tell them to stop, slow down a bit, slow everything down, just flick in a straight line. Make one micro adjustment in a straight line. Then I let them speed up a bit so that they're not gliding, their flicks have actual acceleration to them, and they become a little more viable. I still have them pause between the flicks and micros and really focus on the straight technique in practice for a few weeks to just really get this down before I start working on the transitions with them. And then I start taking them step by step through the different transitions between flicks and micros. If someone has good flicks and good micros, but they have really bad transitions, it looks like they just have bad micros, but it's actually bad transitions. Instead of the shakiness coming from being unable to make the micro adjustment, it comes from being unable to slow down their flick, stop their flick, and carry into the micro adjustment, and the precise control for the micro is actually fine. A good way to tell these two apart is if right after the shakiness you see a relatively more consistent micro adjustment, or if on wider scenarios where they have to go faster and faster, the shakiness gets worse and worse rather than the micro adjustment inability staying constant. After they can get this down, I try to get them to slowly transition the flicks into the micros rather than having a stop. First, maybe they dip down close to a stop, but keep the momentum, keep moving, and then accelerate back into a micro, and eventually they can carry the flick momentum entirely into the micro without the micro having any of its own momentum. Once the flicks and micros are all good, we can start working on clicking immediately and reacting faster, but prior to those changes, those things aren't worth practicing or working on as much. They both are practiced pretty well in the same scenarios. Just any scenario where the bot exists for a limited amount of time, it appears and disappears, you have to react to move fast, you have to click to move fast, and all those different things. So the real secret to having consistent flicks, consistent aim, and all of that is just being able to get very strong initial flicks, very strong micro adjustments, and very strong transitions. Once you get those three mechanics down, you'll find a lot of the randomness day to day and flick to flick goes away because you're so comfortable with it. Thanks for watching, subscribe for more.